It started with the doorbell, a single chime at 2:13 a.m. That's what jolted me upright. Not the wind. Not a nightmare. Just that one cold, mechanical ding-dong echoing through the dark hallway of our small house. I remember staring into the blackness, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. That maybe some wiring glitch or ghost vibration had set it off. But my heart was already pounding in my throat, and the silence that followed felt too absolute to be an accident. I waited, eyes straining toward the closed bedroom door, ears tuned to every creak of the house, and when the doorbell didn't ring again, I thought maybe it was nothing. Just the house settling. Still, I reached for my phone and checked the Nest camera feed, my fingers clumsy with nerves. Nothing. Just our porch, empty and dimly lit by the yellow glow of the single overhead bulb. I stared at it for longer than I want to admit. Then I locked my phone, turned on my side, and tried to remember how to breathe normally again. My boyfriend, Kyle, had left that morning for a weekend trip with his brother, hiking in the mountains upstate. It was the first time I'd stayed alone in the house since we moved in 3 months ago. A small one-story just outside Ashbury, quiet, woodsy, cheap enough to make me suspicious of the listing. But it was cute, cozy, and remote enough that the neighbors barely noticed when we moved in. That night, I had actually been proud of myself. I'd made dinner, poured a glass of wine, even watched a scary movie like some dumb challenge to prove I wasn't a coward. I had just started dozing when the doorbell rang. I was still lying awake 15 minutes later when I heard the noise at the window. It was soft, a brushing sound like something dragging against the glass. At first, I thought it was tree branches, even though there's no tree near the bedroom. I held my breath. It came again. A slow, dry scrape near the bottom edge of the window like fingernails on the outside screen. Then silence again. I sat up and pulled back the curtain. Nothing. Not even a breeze. I stood there staring into the dark yard for a while, arms wrapped around myself, teeth clenched so hard it made my head hurt. Then I closed the curtain and told myself out loud it's probably a raccoon or a squirrel. That's all. But I didn't turn the light off. It was quiet for about an hour after that. Long enough for me to start feeling ridiculous. I went to the kitchen, drank some water, and left the light on when I came back. I didn't even try to sleep, just curled under the blanket with the TV on low. Then, at 4:02 a.m., I heard a voice. It was muffled like it was coming from the back of the house. A man's voice, quiet, indistinct, like he was speaking to someone else through the wall. I froze, every muscle in my body locking into place. My skin felt like it didn't fit right. I muted the TV. The voice was gone. I moved through the house room by room, holding the flashlight app on my phone like it would help. The windows were locked. The doors were locked. Nothing out of place. Until I got to the hallway. The basement door was open. I don't remember opening that door. I hadn't even thought about the basement all night, we hardly ever used it. There was nothing down there but storage bins and an old washer and dryer we never hooked up. Kyle had plans to refinish it into a studio or something eventually, but for now it was just a cold, damp slab of concrete that we both tried to ignore. But there it was, cracked open just enough to show a sliver of black beneath the doorframe, like the house itself was exhaling something it had kept hidden. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at it like if I'd just watched it long enough I'd figure out what was wrong. The air felt different in the hallway, like it was heavier somehow, like the walls were leaning inward. I could see my own reflection in the hallway mirror, pale and tense, eyes wide. There was no sound now. No voice. Just the faint, distant clicking noise drifting up from the basement, mechanical and slow, like something turning or winding. That was the moment I called the police. I told them someone might have broken into my house, that I heard a voice, that the basement door was open and I was alone. The dispatcher didn't sound particularly concerned, asked me if I had a pet, maybe a space heater, said sometimes pipes make strange noises in old homes. I had to insist. She finally agreed to send someone to check it out, though her tone made it clear she wasn't expecting to find anything but a scared woman overreacting. They took 34 minutes to arrive. In that time, I locked myself in the bathroom with the flashlight on and my back against the wall. Every few minutes, I heard something new, the soft creak of a floorboard, the tap of what could have been a pipe, or maybe not. At one point, I swear I heard the same low male voice again, just a few words, whispered, but the words weren't clear enough to make sense of. Just the tone. Calm. Like a question. Like he was waiting for an answer. When the knock came at the front door, I practically sprinted down the hallway. 2 officers. Young, friendly. I could tell they didn't take me seriously even as they walked inside. I explained everything, the doorbell, the window, the voice, the open basement. They nodded along politely, asked a few basic questions, and then, without any urgency, went to check the basement. They didn't find anything, of course. They said the door probably wasn't closed all the way earlier, that maybe a draft nudged it open. They mentioned the clicking sound could have been the old water heater cycling, and the voice? Well, you'd be surprised how well sound travels through walls at night. One of them laughed when I asked if they could check for footprints in the backyard. I signed a report I knew they'd forget about before sunrise. When they left, they gave me the usual speech, call again if anything happens, ma'am. But it's probably nothing. Just nerves, you know. As soon as the door shut behind them, the silence in the house deepened again, like it had been waiting. And then around 6 a.m., just before the sun came up, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There were muddy handprints on the inside of the basement door. They weren't large, not oversized or monstrous like something out of a movie, but they were wrong in a way I can't explain. The palms were small, almost childlike, but the fingers were long, too long, and spaced in a way that made my skin crawl. 5 prints, smeared faintly into the off-white paint like someone had braced themselves before pulling the door closed. Except, they were on the inside. And I hadn't opened that door. I stood there for a long time, staring at them, frozen in that sharp, irrational logic your brain clings to when it's trying to stay calm. Maybe Kyle had gone down there earlier in the week. Maybe the police didn't notice. Maybe the house had shifted. Maybe. The light in the hallway flickered once, then went out. I didn't scream. I just turned and walked slowly back into the bedroom, sat down on the edge of the bed, and stared at the floor. I kept my phone clutched tight in my hand, but I didn't call anyone. I didn't know what I'd even say. The only thing I was sure of anymore was that I wasn't alone and maybe never had been. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because when I opened my eyes again, the room was full of sunlight, and for a second I felt stupid. Everything looked normal. Too normal. It had that artificial calm, like a stage set just after the actors leave. I walked the house again. No handprints. The basement door was closed. Even the nest cam showed nothing from the night before. Just static at 2:13 a.m. and then a clean jump cut to 2:15. Cal texted me mid-morning asking how I slept. I lied. Said it was fine. Said the house was quiet. Said I couldn't wait for him to come back. But that night, I didn't go to bed. I kept all the lights on and sat in the living room facing the hallway waiting, not sure if I wanted something to happen or not happen. There was a weight to the house now, a pressure that settled into the walls like it was holding its breath. At 2:13 a.m. exactly, the doorbell rang again. I didn't move. No one was on the porch. No footsteps. No voice. Just the same flicker of static in the nest feed. And then, from the hallway, the sound started again, soft, deliberate clicking from beneath the floorboards like something metal being turned slowly. Not loud. Not frantic. Just steady. Patient. And this time, it didn't stop. I crept toward the basement door again, every step feeling like I was sinking deeper into something I wouldn't be able to leave behind. I knelt, pressed my ear to the door. The clicking was louder now, not just mechanical, but layered with something else, something rhythmic and wet. And beneath it, so faint I almost missed it, a voice whispered up through the wood. It said my name. Not once. Not loud. Just barely a breath. I backed away, hand over my mouth, and as I did, I noticed something I hadn't before, the faint outline of fresh scratches along the bottom edge of the door, like fingernails had been clawing at it from the inside. I turned and ran, locked myself in the bathroom again, and waited until sunrise. When Kyle got back the next day, I told him everything. He checked the basement himself, tried to joke about mice and faulty wiring, but I could tell he was shaken too. He found nothing. No prints. No voice. No sound. That was a month ago. Since then, the clicking hasn't stopped. It only comes at night, always at the same time. The police came once more and told me again it was probably pipes, but they wouldn't go down there. Kyle doesn't hear it anymore. Or says he doesn't. And last night, when I finally worked up the nerve to open the basement door myself, there was something new waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs. A small tape recorder. Still running. Still clicking. And the only thing on the tape was my voice, saying things I never remember saying. Things I know I've never said out loud. The first time I heard the flute, I thought it was just wind cutting through the cedar branches in a weird way, high, whistling, almost musical. But then the sound shifted, became too precise, too rhythmic. Like someone was playing a real instrument, just out of sight. It was a little after 3 a.m. and the only reason we were out there at that hour was because of a stupid dare. I didn't even want to go at first, but my girlfriend Mariah had that way of getting me to agree to things, not by pushing, but just by saying, "Come on, it'll be fun," in that way that made everything seem harmless. We were at Comanche Lookout Park in San Antonio, which people mostly know for its stone tower and sunset trails, but there's this one path, this overgrown, half-erased trail off the main loop that locals always whisper about but never really explain. Some say it was closed off after a violent crime in the 90s, others say it's just a dangerous stretch, easy to get lost in. But every version of the story ends the same way: don't go there after dark. So of course, that's exactly what we did. The first 20 minutes weren't scary at all. The city lights faded and the trees started swallowing the moonlight. We had our flashlights out, but they barely helped. Everything was damp and muffled, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums like your body knows you shouldn't be there. Mariah was walking a little ahead, her boots crunching softly against the dirt and leaf litter. She was humming to herself, which was weird because she never hums, not unless she's nervous. I didn't say anything about it. I didn't want to admit that I was getting nervous too. The path narrowed into a kind of hollow, like a trench worn down by time, with thick oaks leaning in from both sides. That's when I noticed it. The hum she was doing didn't match the tune I was hearing. Her hum was low and disjointed. But that sound, the one rising gently through the trees, was smooth, clean, and distant, like a flute played by someone who didn't need to breathe. "Do you hear that?" I asked, but my voice came out quieter than I intended, barely louder than the breath fogging in front of my face. Mariah stopped, tilted her head, and for a second I thought she might say she didn't hear anything, that it was just my imagination. But she didn't. Instead, she nodded slowly, almost like she was afraid to move too much. "Yeah," she said. "It's coming from ahead. But it's not a recording or anything, is it?" I didn't answer. I just took a step closer to her, and that's when the flute stopped. Not faded, stopped, like a hand snapping shut over a candle flame. We stood there for what felt like a full minute, listening to nothing. Then the trees behind us rustled, just slightly. Not like an animal or a bird, more like someone moving carefully, deliberately, trying not to make a sound and failing just a little bit. "Okay," I whispered. "Let's head back." Mariah didn't argue. She turned around quickly, flashlight flicking from side to side like she was already expecting to see something watching us. We hadn't walked more than 20 steps when the flute started again. But this time it wasn't coming from ahead or behind. It was coming from above, high in the trees, directly over the path, like something was up there, watching and playing all at once. Neither of us spoke. We just kept walking, faster now, almost running, the light from our flashlights bouncing in wild arcs. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, and the air suddenly felt heavy, not cold, not hot, just wrong, like it was pressing down on us. The trail didn't look the same anymore. It should have led straight back to the parking lot, but the twists and forks felt unfamiliar. Trees that had been off to the side were suddenly crowding in, their branches too low, like they were trying to keep us here. And through it all, the flute kept playing. Closer now? Closer than it should have been. The further we walked, the more it felt like the forest was folding in on itself, like we weren't moving forward at all, just circling through the same dark corridor of twisted trees and thorn-choked undergrowth. I remember the way Mariah's flashlight flickered against her palm, her grip slick with sweat, and how she kept glancing over her shoulder even though she didn't say anything. Her silence scared me more than anything. Mariah wasn't the quiet type. She made dumb jokes when she was scared, tried to brush things off, but now she was just watching, listening. Like she knew something I didn't. The flute kept playing, and the sound had changed. It was still rhythmic, still careful and melodic, but it wasn't beautiful anymore. It was taunting. Like whoever was playing it knew we were lost, knew we were scared, and was enjoying every second of it. Sometimes it drifted far ahead of us, soft and slow, like a lure. Then it would echo from behind, sharp and staccato like a warning. Each time it moved, it got harder to tell which way was forward. The trees didn't make sense. They doubled back, stretched taller, leaned at impossible angles. Every once in a while I thought I saw the flicker of movement just beyond our light, but it never had form, just a ripple, a suggestion, like the dark itself was shifting. I pulled out my phone, hoping to at least check our GPS, but there was no signal, not even a bar. No Wi-Fi, no compass. Just that little gray, no service message like a dead thing on the screen. Mariah finally spoke, but her voice didn't sound like hers. It was breathy, low, almost monotone. "Do you think it's walking with us?" I didn't answer her. Couldn't, because I knew it was. I could feel it. That pressure, like eyes on the back of your neck, except it wasn't just your neck. It was your chest, your spine, your legs, like your whole body was being studied, mapped, measured. Like it was choosing which one of us to take first. And then the flute stopped again. I didn't even realize how much it had filled the space around us until it was gone. The silence hit like a wall. My ears rang from the absence of it. Mariah had frozen mid-step, one foot hanging above the earth, like she was waiting for something, or trying not to trigger something. I took her hand, and she didn't flinch, didn't squeeze back. She just let me hold it, cold and stiff. We kept walking. We didn't talk. I didn't check my phone again. Time stopped making sense. It could have been 15 minutes or 2 hours, I don't know. I just remember the trees getting thinner, the trail flattening out, and this hope swelling in my chest that maybe we'd finally broken free of whatever we'd wandered into. And that's when we heard it again. But this time it wasn't a flute. It was breathing. Heavy, wet breathing just a few feet behind us. So close that when we stopped, we could hear the way it faltered slightly. Like whatever it was hadn't expected us to hear it. I didn't look. I didn't want to see what was there. I whispered, "Don't turn around." And Mariah, brave, curious, fearless Mariah, nodded. But I felt her trembling. We started walking faster, not running, just enough to move like we had a purpose, like we knew where we were going. The trees thinned further, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a flash of something ahead. Not light, not exactly, but a clearing, maybe. Something open. And then the flute came back. But now it was all around us. Every direction. As if the trees themselves were playing it. We ran. Not because we had a plan. Not because we knew where we were going. We just couldn't listen to that sound anymore. It wasn't music. It was control. Like it was pulling at the animal part of our minds, confusing it, stretching it, unraveling us from the inside out. Branches clawed at our arms. My leg caught on a root and I nearly went down. Mariah yanked me up without a word and kept going. I could feel her pulse in her hand. Fast and wild, not syncing with mine. Something was wrong. We stumbled into the clearing, gasping for air, expecting something. An open path, parking lot, a sign. But there was nothing. Just trees. More trees. Endless trees. I don't remember exactly when I realized we'd been walking in a circle, but once I did, I couldn't unsee it. The same thick-limbed oak leaning over the trail like it was bowing. The same patch of yellow wildflowers clustered near a cracked piece of stone. The same crooked trail sign half swallowed by vines. Only this time, the words were gone, like something had scraped the paint off. Mariah was ahead of me now, moving faster, shoulders hunched like she was bracing against a storm that hadn't broken yet. I didn't call out to her. I didn't want to hear my voice out loud. It felt like anything we did or said might be feeding it. Whatever it was. The flute had stopped again, but now something worse had taken its place. Our footsteps were echoing, not in the way sound bounces off buildings or rocks. These echoes were delayed, like they were trying to catch up. For every step we took, we'd hear a second set behind us a heartbeat later. Just a little too slow, just a little too heavy. Not in sync, like something was walking with us, but couldn't quite match our rhythm. I turned around once, just once, and I swear to God, I saw someone or something, standing between the trees, tall and still and slightly tilted, like its spine didn't know how to be human. No face, just shape. It didn't move. It didn't need to. I looked away. I didn't tell Mariah. The air started to change, too. At first it was just cooler. Then it was thicker, like walking through fog you couldn't see. Breathing felt like inhaling water. My lungs ached. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. We found another trail marker, but it was backward, as if we'd crossed into the mirror of where we'd been. And then we heard it again. The flute, but it wasn't behind us. It wasn't ahead. It was inside the trees. The trunks vibrated with the sound, not loud, not blaring, but deep and slow, like it had sunk into the roots and was rising up through the bark. I pressed my hand to one of the trees and felt it humming, almost like a voice trying to whisper in a language I didn't understand. Mariah finally stopped. Her light flickered once, then died. Just like that. The battery was new, we checked them before we left. I moved beside her, held up mine, and that's when we saw the carvings. Dozens of them. On the trees. Around us. Above us. Eyes. Not symbols. Not initials. Just crude, jagged eyes, gouged deep into the bark. Some narrow, some round, some weeping lines like blood or sap. They were staring down at us in every direction. Mariah didn't cry, but her mouth was open like she wanted to. And I think I whispered something then, I don't remember what. Maybe a prayer. Maybe her name. Maybe both. And the forest answered. Not in words. In sound. A breath, long and low, like the forest exhaled. Then came the flute, loud, sudden, close. Right next to us. We ran again. I don't remember the path. I don't remember the turns. Just the rush of air in my ears and the taste of dirt on my tongue and the throb of panic so strong it felt like a second heartbeat in my skull. At some point, the trees thinned, then opened, and we were standing on the road. Just like that. The trailhead was maybe 10 feet away. Our car sat quietly on the gravel shoulder, and beyond that, the faint orange haze of San Antonio's streetlights blurred the horizon. I didn't ask Mariah if she was okay. She didn't ask me. We just got in the car. Neither of us spoke the entire drive home. It's been 3 weeks. Every night, just as I start to drift off, I hear it again, that melody, faint and perfect, like someone playing a wooden flute just outside my window. Mariah won't answer my texts anymore. And last night, when I looked out at the trees behind my house, I saw something standing there, just a little too tall, just a little too still. Listening. Watching. Waiting. I first saw the man in room 413 around 2:40 a.m., long after visiting hours had ended and long before my mind was fully capable of trusting what it saw. He was convulsing violently on a gurney in the center of the room, his back arching off the bed in sharp, unnatural spasms as though something was tearing through him from the inside. The lights in the room flickered once, briefly illuminating the pallid stretch of his face. His eyes were wide open. Locked. Watching. When I blinked, he was gone. No bed. No patient. Just a clean, empty room with the overhead lights steady and humming above white-tiled silence. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just stood there, staring through the small square of safety glass in the door, waiting for something to make it make sense. I'd been working night shifts as a hospital pharmacy tech for almost 8 months, enough time to understand that sleep, when you don't get any, will start clawing at the edges of your sanity. I hadn't slept properly in 3 days. This was the third overnight in a row, and the weight of exhaustion had long since sunk into my bones. You don't notice when the hallucinations start, they slip in through the cracks between fluorescent lights and buzz quietly in the background until you begin to question everything. The pharmacy was down on the first floor, tucked away near the loading docks, with a tiny window that looked out onto a corridor no one used after midnight. Most of the hospital above me was dark and still, with only the faint sound of beeping monitors and the occasional clatter of a nurse's shoes to remind me I wasn't entirely alone. But the silence was heavy, oppressive, the kind that made you listen harder than you wanted to. I returned to my station, trying to shake the image from my head. The scanner light on the pill counter blinked patiently at me, casting brief red glows over the wall like a heartbeat. My hands moved automatically, sorting doses, logging medications, sealing bags. It was mechanical. Safe. But then I heard it again, a soft thump. Not like footsteps. More like something dropping onto the floor from a low height. A sound that didn't belong here. I froze. The lights above the prep station buzzed louder for a moment, then dipped in brightness. Thump. It came again, closer now. Just beyond the double doors that led to the hallway. I don't know why, but I opened the doors. I didn't see anything at first, just the long corridor stretching in both directions, painted that same sterile off-white that every hospital insists makes people feel calm. A flickering light at the far end made shadows dance across the linoleum. That's when I saw him. An old man, maybe late 70s, standing perfectly still beneath the exit sign at the end of the corridor. He was wearing a hospital gown, the pale blue kind that opens in the back, but it was too clean, too stiff, like it had never been worn before. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stood there, staring at me. I took a step forward without realizing it, something in his stillness drawing me in. Then, just as I passed the intersection near radiology, the hallway lights behind him blinked out completely. And when they came back on, he was gone. Just gone. I didn't mention it to anyone. It was easier to blame the lack of sleep, to pretend I hadn't really seen anything. That's what you do when your body's too tired to panic, you rationalize. But then the elevator opened by itself. And it was going up. I stood in front of the open elevator doors, staring into the empty car as the cool air from inside brushed against my face like breath from a crypt. There hadn't been a chime. No one had pressed the button. It had just opened on its own, slow and deliberate, like it was waiting for me. I don't know why I stepped inside. I told myself I was just checking that maybe someone had hit the button upstairs and the call got rerouted. But in the pit of my stomach, I felt it. That slippery, irrational dread that rises when you know you're doing something you shouldn't, but you can't explain why. The elevator shuddered as it ascended. Floor 2, 3, 4. The overhead light flickered with every stop, dimming long enough that I caught brief, translucent reflections of myself in the metal walls, reflections that didn't seem to blink when I did. The air inside felt thicker with every floor, like I was rising into something heavier than gravity. When the doors opened, it wasn't to a hallway I recognized. The fourth floor should have been pediatrics. Brightly colored murals, sea creature decals on the walls, cheerful lights that stayed on even at night. But what I stepped into was dim. Silent. The emergency lights buzzed overhead, casting pale red glows like the last embers of a dying fire. The nurse's station was empty. I called out softly, just a casual hello? But my voice felt swallowed by the silence, like sound didn't carry properly here. I took a few cautious steps down the hallway. Most of the patient room doors were closed, but one stood slightly ajar. Room 413. The same room. The one where I'd seen the convulsing man earlier. The light above the door flickered rapidly, casting erratic shadows across the floor. My pulse picked up. I felt my hands go cold. But still, I moved closer. I pushed the door open slowly with my knuckles, letting it swing in with a long, low groan. The room was empty again. No gurney, no equipment, not even a chair in the corner. Just bare linoleum, the bed stripped and pushed against the wall like it had never been used. I don't know how long I stood there, staring into the emptiness, trying to remember if I'd really seen what I thought I'd seen earlier or if my mind had already unraveled. The silence pressed harder against my ears, making the faintest noises, like a distant drip or the creak of metal, feel uncomfortably loud. Then the room grew colder. Not a draft, not air conditioning. It felt as though the heat had been pulled out of the very walls. I turned to leave, but standing just outside the room, partially in shadow, was the same old man. This time he was closer. Maybe 10 feet away. His head was tilted slightly, like he was trying to understand something about me. His skin looked pale and almost translucent under the weak red light, but what struck me hardest was his expression. Not anger. Not fear. Just a kind of deep, paralyzing sadness. We locked eyes for what felt like a full minute, though I can't be sure. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, the sound of my own breath becoming ragged. And then, just like before, the lights above him blinked out. And again, he was gone. I backed away slowly, hands shaking, heart hammering like I'd run a mile. I jabbed the elevator button repeatedly until the doors opened, the familiar hum of its machinery the most comforting sound I'd heard in hours. When I stepped inside, I didn't turn my back to the doors. I stood facing the hallway until the metal sealed shut. On the way down, the lights flickered once. And I swear to God, in that brief moment of darkness, I saw him standing behind me in the mirror. I didn't scream. I didn't turn around. I just stared at the mirror's reflection in that thin strip of time between flickers, watching the outline of the old man behind me, his eyes fixed, unblinking, the hospital gown hanging loose around his brittle frame like it didn't belong to him anymore. When the lights came back on, he was gone. But the cold stayed. The elevator dropped smoothly to the ground floor, humming like a lullaby played just a bit too slow. When the doors opened, I stepped out like I was waking from a dream, that thick, underwater feeling where nothing feels real but your fear. I walked back toward the pharmacy, barely breathing, my footsteps echoing too loud in the empty corridor. I kept the lights on this time. All of them. Every switch I could find. I needed the brightness to push back whatever the dark had become. There were still 3 hours left on my shift. 3 long, silent hours. I tried to work, I really did. I triple-checked labels, scanned everything twice, even dumped and recounted pills I knew were already right, just to keep my hands moving. But I couldn't focus. My body was there, but something in my mind had detached, hovering like static just outside of reach. Around 4:20 a.m., the intercom cracked once, faint and garbled, like someone had pressed the button by accident. Then it happened again. A soft buzz. A click. A whisper. Just one word, drawn out in a tone that made my skin prickle. Come. That was it. Nothing more. The line went dead. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I stared at the speaker above the pharmacy door until my eyes burned, half expecting it to crackle back to life. But it didn't. Just silence. It must have been a full 20 minutes before I found the courage to step into the corridor again. I told myself I'd go check the security desk, maybe talk to one of the night guards. See if anyone else had heard something, seen something. I needed to tether myself to someone, anyone who could tell me I wasn't unraveling. But the front desk was empty. The monitors above the security station were on, static hissing faintly from one of the feeds. I leaned in, scanning each screen. Most were showing quiet hallways, dark patient rooms, flickering elevator doors. But one camera, the one pointing outside near the ambulance bay, made my blood run cold. He was standing there, just beyond the doors, bathed in the amber glow of the parking lot lights. The old man. He wasn't moving, just standing in the center of the frame like he had all night, motionless and impossible. But now there was something in his hand, a small white bottle, the kind we use in the pharmacy. He lifted it slowly, deliberately, holding it up as if offering it back. I stared at the screen, my hand frozen on the edge of the desk. And then he smiled. It was subtle, small, a flicker across a face that hadn't changed all night. But it was there, and it chilled me more than anything else. The camera blinked, glitched, and when it returned, the lot was empty. I don't remember going back to the pharmacy. I don't remember sitting down. All I know is that at some point, I looked up and saw the bottle he was holding earlier, the same white bottle sitting on the counter next to the scanner. No one had been in the pharmacy with me. No one had called down. No patient files were waiting. But the bottle was there. And on the label, in my own handwriting, was a name I didn't recognize. A patient who, according to our system, had died 3 nights ago. My shift ended at 7. I waited by the entrance until someone else arrived. I didn't explain. I didn't speak. I just walked past them into the morning air, the sky starting to lighten behind the buildings like nothing had ever happened. I only looked back once. He was standing across the street by the service gate, the early fog curling around his ankles. Same gown. Same eyes. Just watching. And then I blinked. And he was gone.